Welcome to the Clarinet Podcast, the show about all that's new and neat with clarinet, with the neatest people in the industry. You can support the ongoing production of this independently produced program by donating to our Patreon at clarinet.com/support. Supporters get early access to extended ad-free podcasts and exclusive access to patron-only episodes and live events. Today on the Clarinet Podcast, I've got something extra special for you, and what it is an episode from my other show called OK Podcast, which is about my favorite band called Radiohead. Now, I recently recorded a conversation with someone who is a doubler. His name is Steve Hamilton, and he actually recorded Saxophone on one of Radiohead's biggest selling albums, most popular albums, called Kid A, which was released in the year 2000. Now, this was super exciting for me because it, in my opinion, is the best album of all time. It's by far my favorite album released by any musical group ever. It has changed my life more than any other musical work, and I can't believe that I had the chance to speak to this person. But, you know, as I was recording it, I got thinking, this is something that I feel that the Clarinet audience would benefit from listening to, because we really get to delve into the life of what it's like to be a professional touring and recording sax player with major rock bands. And you know what? This is not an area that a lot of us are very familiar with. So I think back all the way to episode 4 of the podcast, where Daryl Caswell was talking about making sure that you're not getting too blinkered and hung up on only what you do, and that you explore other areas of your profession and even other professions in order to try and advance your own career. So I actually did post a poll in the Clarinet community on Facebook, and I asked people if they would prefer me to leave all the Radiohead stuff in, and I'm happy to say that people actually did vote for this to happen. So anyways, I do hope that you enjoy this episode. I hope that you enjoy taking part in another one of my passions. And even if you don't enjoy it, I hope that you still appreciate this episode, or that you just move on and listen to the next one. That would be okay too. I'm not going to expect every person who listens to this to suddenly become a massive Radiohead fan just because I am, or even really to like this genre of music, to be honest. But before we get started, let me just tell you a little bit about the album and why it was so important, and maybe just introduce you to the some of the concepts that musically are in there. So in Radiohead's early days, they started off in about 1993 with a hit song, Creep, and a lot of people thought that they would become basically a one-hit wonder band and go nowhere after that single. Well, in 1995, they released their second album called The Bends. It was basically their most, quote, normal rock album, and had a lot of basic song forms on there, and a lot of really great music, which did make it to the radio airwaves, but nothing too revolutionary yet. In 1997, they released what many consider to be their best album, called OK Computer. It was sort of a more progressive look at the rock genre, and started experimenting with different timbres while still maintaining a basic rock song structure for the most part. Although some of the songs start to experiment with something called a terminal climax, which is where we basically go, instead of just verse, chorus, we'll have like a verse, chorus, and then a totally new section to close out the song, which makes it really interesting. A perfect example of that would be a song called Karma Police. Anyway, so Radiohead established themselves as one of the best rock bands of a generation, and they took all that and basically threw it out the window, and in 2000 they came out with the electronic-driven album called Kid A, which basically features just a bunch of really bizarre instrumentation. Many of these instruments, such as the Ons Martineau, had never been used in rock music before, to my knowledge anyways, and definitely not in a popular multi-platinum selling album that made the top of the charts in the UK. Anyway, so the songs on this album, the interesting thing is they explore totally different timbres and musical environments, and the voice of Tom York, the lead singer, is actually used more as an instrument of some sort, and is very subdued in the mix for much of the recording. And interestingly too, the vocals, a lot of the words were written by a means of writing out a bunch of different sentences, basically chopping them up, putting them in a hat, and pulling out those lyrics and making very abstract, disconnected lyrics, which are not the primary focus of the song. So to me, that's one reason I love it so much, is it really takes the music and makes that front and center. That being said, the album is totally a slow burner. You're going to have a really difficult time, like I did, getting into it, probably, if it's your first time hearing it. I hated it for a long time, but it grew on me to the point where it's absolutely my favorite album. So where does the saxophone come in? Well, at the end of a song called the National Anthem, which has a very repetitive bass line that actually stays the same for the entire song, there's a really chaotic saxophone and brass section that comes in, and basically, in the words of the lead singer Tom York, is meant to sound kind of like marching into a traffic jam or something like that. And they really achieved this effect. I really wish I could play this song on the podcast, but there's been a lot of situations recently where podcasts are getting taken down due to copyright alleged infringement, even though I would consider that to be fair use. But so what I'm going to do in the show notes is link to a video where lead singer Tom York, one of the most legendary performances of this song, is basically bouncing around as it sounds like he was in the studio. And Steve Hamilton, who is today's guest on the show, is actually there performing on stage with the band. So again, whether or not you like Radiohead, I hope that provides a little bit of insight into why I find this album so interesting, why I'm so passionate about the band. And I really hope that you enjoyed today's conversation and take away not only what it's like from the totally other side of the classical realm, but also really take in some of Steve's stories about working with this group and the lessons he learned. I think it's super valuable. At the very end, for those of you who are compositionally minded, Steve also shares some conversation about his other career as a film composer. So this is a really great episode. Like I said, I hope it's not too far-fetched for the Clarinet audience. If it is, I'm really sorry. I'll see you next time for an amazing episode with none other than Stanley Drucker. So we're going to have back-to-back here 2 episodes that should really please everybody. Make sure you tune in for the next episode, by the way. It was a lot of content sent in by listeners. It's a Q&A. I think it's the best episode yet of the podcast. Stanley's super high energy, and the episode is actually for his 90th birthday. So, wow, this was the longest intro I've had in a while. I hope that provides you some context and doesn't leave you high and dry about Radiohead. That's one of their songs. Sorry for the pun. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll get to it right after these short messages from our sponsors. Hosting for Clarinet is sponsored by Bakun and their new line of Lumiere clarinets, barrels, and bells. Get 10% off your next accessory purchase by using code Clarinet at bakunmusical.com. Join renowned clarinetist David Schifrin at the International Clarinet Celebration in beautiful Portland, Oregon, June 24th to 30th. Hosted by Chamber Music Northwest, this event combines a full week of concerts by world-class artists like Corrado Giuffretti and Jose Frank Ballester. There's also clarinet masterclasses, lectures, clarinet mentors amateur workshops, ensemble performance opportunities, a clarinet marketplace, and a young artist competition. Passes are on sale now, and you can learn more at cmnw.org. D'Addario Woodwinds has an exciting new weekly trivia show called Don't Blow It. You can check it out every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on their Instagram channel, and if you know the right answers to the questions, you might even have the chance to win some amazing new gear. By the way, if you haven't had a chance to try D'Addario's new reserve clarinet reeds, you're in for a real treat. They're using some really amazing new technology and manufacturing techniques that are helping achieve super consistent results. You can pick up a box at your local music store or head to clarinet.com/reeds to buy a box right now.
I can assure you they were all there, very much involved in the whole procedure. He said to make it sound like a traffic jam, and then he just started jumping up and down, trying to get the energy that he wanted out of us.
You're listening to OK Podcast, a podcast by Sean Perrin about Radiohead. Today on the podcast, I'm thrilled to be joined by extra special guest Steve Hamilton, who performed saxophone on Kid A. We dive deep into what it was like recording the National Anthem at the studio with the band on site, what it was like playing live with the band throughout the Amnesiac and Kid A tours in 2000 and 2001. And we also talk about what it's like being a professional saxophone player touring with major rock bands. At the end, we discuss how Steve's career as a film composer has been augmented by his experience playing for rock bands and his classical education in college. Show notes for today's episode are available at okpodcast.com/3.
The first thing I remember about it was that my son had just been born about 10 days before. I think it was the first time I'd sort of left the house in a professional capacity. But there was a bit of preamble before the session. Johnny Greenwood was basically in charge of organising parts, and it was, I think, his vision really to have. In fact, there were 8 horn players in total on that track. So we sort of organised. Picked a few players that we liked playing with, and then I think he faxed actually. It's probably before I think it's before proper emails actually, and I think he faxed me a part, which I may have somewhere actually, which I can dig out. But it was basically saying that his kind of vision of it, and he wanted a baritone sax, a bit of alto, a bit of tenor, and a couple of trombones, and one solitary trumpet. So it's quite an unorthodox horn section, really. Then we made our way to their studio in Oxfordshire, a beautiful barn place, and then it all got a bit rock and roll, really, I suppose. I don't know how much you know about what took place that day.
Yeah, no, I'd actually, a listener question came in and the person said, I'd like to know everything about the end of the National Anthem. And I have to say, I have a bit of the same sentiment, but let's step back a little bit. So how did the band get in touch with you? Did you already know Johnny Greenwood, or?
It was a friend of mine, a guy called Andy Bush, who's a trumpet player. He actually teaches at Abingdon School, which is where they all went. And they kind of got in touch with him. And he was a very close friend of mine at the time, and we had a horn section together called the Hook Horns. And whenever I'd get called to do something and needed a horn, trombone and trumpet, I would call him, and then we'd talk about who else to use. Likewise, he would do with me. So it kind of evolved from that, really, and they kind of trust him, and he's a good guy. So Andy Bush and I put together another 6 players and coerced them into turning up at this barn. So it was basically through him, really, that that I think they just trusted him, and he's a reliable sort. He's not a heavy drinking, boozy trumpet player, as quite a lot of people are. And I think they're a bit quite a cerebral kind of band. So we kind of got the seal of approval, and we showed up there in about 5 different cars, parked up, got our instruments out, had a chat, and had a cup of coffee, and talked a little rubbish. And then slowly, I think the band were actually living in the barn at the time. The people kind of various degrees of dishevelment came down the stairs wearing kind of dressing gowns or looking like they'd been up all night, slightly unshaven, and how you'd expect rock musicians, I suppose.
So they were actually there during the session for this?
Yeah, they were all there, yeah.
That's so interesting to me because, I talked to another clarinetist on my other podcast, Clarinet, about recording with a rock group once, one of my other favorite rock bands. And I asked him similar questions about what the session was like. And the band leaders, the band members weren't even there. So this is super exciting to me that Radiohead is so involved. And I guess I was in some ways worried about talking to you because I was worried I might face some of that same disappointment. But this...
Well, I can assure you they were all there and very much involved in the whole procedure. I would say that, well, it was a double act, really. I mean, everyone was there and chatting around, but they know what their roles are in the band, or they certainly did at that time. Johnny was the kind of sort of mechanical, put the music together kind of merchant, and then Tom would. He was an extraordinary character because he has a mad look in it. It's a kind of mad expression that you might get from him. Mm-hmm. And he walked into the, we were all setting up and, doing what horn players normally do, just play something that sounds difficult and impressive to show off. I don't know if if you do that in your capacity as a clarinetist, but you put people little flourishes in here. So you're getting all this cacophony, and Nigel Goodrich, who was producing, was just getting a sound together in this room. And it was a huge cavernous room, much bigger than most traditional kind of recording studios. Not much acoustic treatment around, so it's quite live. I think a couple of rugs on the floor, if I remember rightly, but I'm not totally sure about that. And then they basically let us play for this, reading from this very scant chart that was, cobbled together. Basically, a piece of paper with, a series of instruments on it. Sometimes you obviously have just your own part, but it was a full score, which means that You get all instruments. So I think there was baritone, bass trombone, tenor trombone, a couple of altos, two tenors, and a trumpet. Pretty sure that's what it was. So you'd have that all on one sheet, and it would just play along. But of course, it didn't really work exactly how they wanted it to, because it was a kind of prototype idea. So we looked at that, we played it, and then Nigel Goodrich played the track. We all got a sound together, put the headphones on, just started playing, and then Tom came in and started completely sort of disassembling it. Really, I think.
Mm-hmm. In what way?
Well, because it basically it was time to chuck the music away, chuck the chart away, and he would just say, actually, just give it an impression of something else, just a bit more craggy, a bit more spiky, and he was chucking all these adjectives at us. And of course, with eight people, it's quite difficult to come to a cohesive decision about what he actually meant. And then I think he said, to make it sound like a traffic jam, which I think is a famous quote of his, but he actually did say that. And then he just started jumping up and down, trying to get the energy that he wanted out of us. And we did probably maybe 5, 6, 7 or 8 takes. I can't really remember how many, but I do remember kind of all of us sweating by the end of it, because he was really, I think it was just watching him kind of conducting us, but not really conducting, that kind of made us put the energy into the room. And it was great, and it sounded pretty mad. As you know, it's a bit discordant, it's a bit random, and yeah, he just sort of instilled in us this sort of desire or more demand to play as craggily and out there as possible, really.
So I want to unpack that a little bit. There's a few questions that come from that for me. So,
yeah, go for it.
So at this point, you guys are recording as a wind section or with the full band? Like, it sounds like that there was sort of a
no. The whole track was recorded previously.
Okay.
And so we were just playing to their recorded material.
So you had vocals, bass, some guitar, the Ons Martineau, instruments like that were already in there?
Everything was in there. And the band, I think Colin Greenwood would kind of sit in the corner, not saying much. He was quite a quiet character, I remember. Johnny was there, but being quiet. Tom had kind of taken over the directorial duties a bit.
Interesting.
And so, yes, it was ready to go. I think I'm not 100% certain about this, but I think everything was on the track apart from the horns at that stage. Because when I heard it when it was released, it was pretty exactly how I remember it. So I don't think they tinkered too much with it. But
oh, that's really interesting, because one of my questions was Tom York said on Canadian TV interview back in I think 2000 that he wasn't even coming up with full songs to the studio, and he was kind of relying on the producer Nigel Godrich to sort of put them together. And one of my questions was, did you guys record large sections of takes together, or was it layered with different instruments? I mean, did you even play more than one saxophone, or was it the 8 guys at once, and that it kind of just was what one of the takes was like?
I think we did all of the takes playing together. There was an American guy called Stan Harrison who was playing the baritone part, which was slightly sort of odds with everything else, and it's quite a tricky featured part at the beginning. He's a fantastic baritone player. He played on Sledgehammer and stuff by Peter Gabriel, and he's played on everything. He used to play with David Bowie as well.
So he was kind of the one playing that boom bop bop ba da bop, that sort of rhythm.
That's Stan. Yeah.
Okay.
And so he was. So I think the only separation there was, we did a take where, or rather Stan did a take where there's just him playing, I mean, it is 20 odd years ago, so it's fairly fairly vague in my memory, but I think that's what happened. And then once, and then I do remember there's a couple of chords at the end. Well, I mean, I call them chords, but sort of discords, really. I remember us just playing those as well a few times, probably about five or six times, just to get a completely different harmony each time. And I'm fairly certain that they spliced that they took the whole track that we'd played right from the beginning of the song and spliced on the two chords at the end. I think the kind of cadential moments. I mean, you know the track inside out, I'm sure.
Of course, yeah.
So yes, it was so. But in answer to your question, it was we were playing the whole thing right through. And I'm sure Stan did a track on his own as well, just for an experiment. I think they wanted separation, have the option of that. And then we moved around parts. Somebody would play the third or the fourth or something, and then just try it the other way around until they were happy, really. And I think they were, because it was. Well, there is a story that he jumped so hard that Tom jumped up so hard that he broke his foot.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions.
Yes, well, there you go.
Is that true?
No, I don't know that at the time. I mean, he was behaving slightly erratically. I don't know whether he broke his foot, but I think it certainly wouldn't surprise me because he had bare feet and he was jumping around on this sort of wooden floor. I mean, it may have had a rug on it, but
yeah.
It was it was fairly frenetic kind of behavior.
So what was the atmosphere like as a musician? Like you said, first of all, I'm amazed that you were able to go there 10 days after your daughter was born. We had our first daughter over the summer, and first gig back being with Radiohead, I can't imagine the intimidation, especially as a fan.
Well, I wasn't intimidated because they're such lovely blokes, and it was no, there wasn't. It's the sort of place where you go and everyone made you feel comfortable, and they were over, if it's possible to be over friendly and over generous with their kind remarks. They were definitely going down that route rather than being offish. And I've experienced everything in between as a session player.
Rock artists particularly are rather famous for not even being able to read music. I don't think Tom York reads music. So I wonder what, for you, the preparation was like for this, in the sense of feeling like you showed up that day ready to go. I mean, is that just something that for jazzers, you feel just ready to go in and make music?
Well, I think there's always a sort of vague sense of trepidation about going in and not fully knowing. But on this occasion, as I said, we were forewarned with it that this full score thing had been sent to me and Andy. I don't think the rest of the players had it, but we kind of looked at it and thought, I think we laughed to ourselves and said, that'll never be what we play on the record. So when we were standing around and I think it's a converted barn that they bought. They own the place, and it's a cool little place. Well, when I say little, it isn't that little. There's sort of lots of different levels, and I think, as I said earlier, quite a lot of the band was sleeping upstairs when we first arrived. I've got no idea what time we arrived. It's probably about a midday call or something. And there's always that preamble of having a coffee and having a chat and wasting a bit of time. But some people just want to get, as you know yourself, want to get down to it straight away and start recording. But there was a very, very. It was you were there for the whole day. That was the feeling as soon as we arrived. And we probably for about 2 or 3 hours we were playing this track, and then somebody, I think Colin said, "Do you anyone hungry?" And somebody just magicked up a lasagna and salad and a couple of bottles of wine.
Wow!
And we all just sat around, and one thing I do remember is that they had a really lovely turntable, and they were playing vinyl, which sounded brilliant because they obviously have fairly decent speakers as well, being Radiohead. And and we just sat round and picked somebody put a record on, somebody else put and it was a really lovely atmosphere actually. And they were incredibly delighted with how the session went. Not blowing my own trumpet here, but they were they got what they wanted, I think. So they made us feel very welcome in their studio, and quite a cavernous building, and we were all just sitting around eating food and chatting, and it was like being with old mates. Actually, it was bizarre.
I love that it's, like I said, I love that it's basically like I imagined.
It was a lovely day. Yeah, there was, and to your viewers, I mean, we joke about this, giving how do you make a musician miserable? Give them a gig, and because musicians tend to really kind of moan about things, but it's one of those things where there's nothing to moan about.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was it was really good fun, and they got exactly what they wanted, and it was quite an inventive few hours as well. There was nothing set in stone particularly. They wanted a few things hit, a few things marked, I suppose, different sections. But they wanted chaos, and they kind of got it a little bit. But yes, it wasn't just a one take. It was several things, and it slightly nurturing the parts along, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, totally. And so you were a previous Radiohead fan, as you said yourself. How did this music compare to what you sort of expected? I mean, they famously took a big shift for this album. The
National Anthem was the first track that I'd heard since OK Computer, I think. Was it? Yeah. So it was like, this doesn't sound like Radiohead very much. It's quite trippy, very trippy kind of vocal. And that bass line is amazing bass thing. It kind of took me by surprise. But it's funny how something can grow on you if you play it 10 times.
What did you think of that bass line in that song the first time you heard it? I mean, I've heard people who are musicians especially go, like, that's it? Just like a drone ostinato type bass line and not much to the song, but that's what I love about it.
That's what I love about it too. Total agreement. It's trancey.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's trippy. It's fun. There's so much energy just in that. So it was. Yes, I think it was. It was a huge departure, as everyone knows, but that was really refreshing to hear. That first thing come in, dong dong dong. And the twisted vocals and great drum sound as well.
Yeah, it's just an amazing soundscape. Did they let you preview any other tracks they were working on, or ask you to contribute bits to others that maybe were unreleased?
Unfortunately, no. We just they wanted us for one task alone, and that was just to do that.
Because also on Amnesiac, there is a little bit of this at the end with the clarinet and the sort of New Orleans style jazzy bit.
Yeah, with
Humphrey Littleton, is that his name?
Yeah, Jim, Humphrey Littleton, who's a great broadcaster. He's not with us anymore, but Jimmy Hastings was playing clarinet, I think.
Yeah, I've tried to reach him several times. I haven't been able to get in touch. So
well, I don't really know him, but I know of him. He's like a sort of old school jazz clarinet player, but it was sort of a really delightful sound that they had. In fact, I think we did a Jules Holland. I don't know if you know Jules Holland over there.
That was literally my next question: is did you play on the Jules Holland and any other live times with the band?
Yeah, okay. So the next thing I think we did after that album, we had our lasagna and we bit off farewells and went home. I think the next thing we did was a live album or a live series of tracks, which I'm not sure ever came out, which was at Air Studios. We recorded about 5 with the band and all the same horn players, and we did maybe about three takes of National Anthem, and then I think they recorded the whole album live. But I've never found. I don't know where that
was. That in New York or in London?
No, that was in London, a place called Air Studios.
I think I have a recording of that. Yeah, so that's for the fans. Then that's the most authentic version, kind of, because it also has the original Wind players. Is that what you're saying?
That's it. That's it. Yeah, yeah. So that was completely live, and I think we did 2 or 3 takes of each track. But again, we only played on that one. But yeah, I'd love to hear that actually.
I could send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Have you played live in any other? So you played on Jules Holland and the Air Studios.
Well, then they phoned us up and said, "Would you like to come and play on Saturday Night Live?" And which was in New York, so we all went over there. And I think it was the day that the album went to #1 in the Billboard charts. And we did a gig at the Roseland Ballroom in New York, and then I think a couple of days later we went to do Saturday Night Live, which was great fun. And just playing that track. I think they played another track as well on the on Saturday Night Live, but I can't remember what that was actually.
I think it was Idiotech.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm like a walking Radiohead encyclopedia.
You are indeed. It's very impressive. So we did that, and that was fantastic. Great fun, to be there, and it was the atmosphere at the Roseland Ballroom, which I've played at before with a couple of bands before, many years ago, and it was absolutely on fire. Really amazing atmosphere.
So that was part of a normal full-length concert, right?
Yeah, that they did a whole gig.
Yeah.
The one regret I have is that I got food poisoning.
Oh.
On the night before we flew, and I was pretty sick on the plane, and I couldn't really enjoy it. And we had that gig the next day, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I feel terrible. But it was still fantastic. And then and we were there for about 10 days, I think, in New York, doing very little other than those two, the Saturday Night Live and Roseland. And what else did we do? We went to Paris and did Canal Plus, which is, and that was. I think they did two tracks. Obviously, National Anthem being one of them. And then they sort of cagily, almost nervously said, "Oh, guys, come into the dressing room," and they very kindly given us multi-platinum discs of Kid A, which is really sweet. Yeah, and
you got to send me a picture of that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I will do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Which was and then they said, "Thank you so much." And again, as I said before, they were so overly grateful, almost embarrassingly grateful for our input.
This is so fantastic, though. And, I love the fact it also speaks to their artistic integrity that they not only shared that with you guys, but they also felt the urge to fly the specific horn players around the world to play with them.
Yeah, well, it could have been so much easier and cheaper to not do that.
Oh, and this happens all the time. And, this maybe answers the question. There's some fans who always say, well, why don't they fly the horn section around, or why don't they have a horn section on National Anthem? We'd love to hear it that way live. But maybe it's because, they want to sort of stick to that integrity of the original people. I'm not sure.
Well, I wonder, you could tell me better than I would know myself. I don't know if they've ever done it with other horns. I'm not sure that they have.
At this point, I'm not sure either.
No,
they of course have a version without horns.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I've never seen anyone else play on it.
Yeah, wow,
so
that's amazing.
That's amazing, and a first time for that.
Yeah,
in the music business.
Well, it's like I said, it speaks so highly to their integrity as artists and their appreciation for what you did.
Yeah, it seems to, and as I said, they could have easily not had us there, but they included us in that, and then I think that was it. I don't think we ever did anything more with them. But the funny thing was that, as I said, they were so effusively over. Kind of praising us all the time.
Yeah.
And then I bumped in. I was at Abbey Road doing a session for a band called Stereophonics. I don't know if you know them.
Yeah.
And I walked into the cafe, and Tom York and Nigel were in there, and I said, "Well, hi guys, nice to see you." And they said, "Yeah, hi, hello. How are you doing? How are you doing? You all right?" And And I said, so what are you doing? They're mastering their next album. And I said, oh, so no horns on this one. And and he said, they all said, no, you lot were a nightmare.
That's funny.
So in stark contrast to all the gushing about. So then I sort of quizzically looked at it, and then they said, "No, only joking. You're brilliant."
Yeah. No, I would hope they were joking.
Yeah. But it was they were a lovely bunch, and it's a shame. It's a shame they didn't want any more on the next album. That would have been a
it seems amazing. Like something they still have strings sometimes, but the horns have been really rather lacking. What did you think of the live version without the saxophones? Did you ever? Well,
there's something huge missing, I think. But But then it kind of sounds like a completely different track. But I do love the track anyway. I think the sort of energy and the motion and that, particularly that bass, is just so brilliant. I remember listening to it once. Actually, I think I'm not sure if it was a Glastonbury thing or it might have been another Jules Holland. But anyway, it was some broadcast. And I remember I didn't even notice that there weren't any horns until the end chord.
Yeah.
So, because it drives itself. It's
Yeah, they fill it out in its own way. And they're sort of famous for, especially with Kid A, reinventing the songs live, which was almost a necessity. Yeah. So is there something that I might not think to ask about the sessions that would be interesting and worth sharing?
It was a very sort of calm. I mean, even though the music isn't calm, there was a very sort of passive kind of attitude to it. Just a very, just let this. I think they get what they want or what they desire by just letting things mutate and just shape. From a tiny little, as I said, that score that they sort of gave us at the beginning. I think they just wanted it to evolve a little bit throughout, and they weren't that bothered about how long it took. If it had taken 7 hours, it wouldn't have mattered to them at all. And it was just I think that's what made it so sort of attractive for all of us. And when the phone went, months later or whatever, to go to do something else with them, like the New York thing, we all jumped at it because it was just a lovely atmosphere. But I don't know if there's anything particularly that was surprising apart from Tom probably breaking his foot. If he broke, I think he probably did.
At least sprained it. Let's say that.
Yeah. We'll keep that going.
So, of course, you've also toured with artists toured and recorded with artists like Aretha Franklin, Amy Winehouse, Alicia Keys, Beyonce, Bono, many others. And even when I contacted you recently, you were on tour with Noel Gallagher. So this is something that's really ongoing for you and has been for your whole career. What's this like as a professional kind of day-to-day gig?
I went to music college and I sort of didn't do an awful lot of what I was supposed to be doing there, which was classical saxophone. And I just used to listen to, King Curtis and sort of rock, soul-y rock players. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted to do. And I remember saying to my teacher, John Hall, I really want to be a rock or pop saxophone player. And he said, no chance of you doing that, mate. And I said, what? And it from that moment on, I thought, it's exactly what I'm going to do. I don't know why, to this day, he said, there's no chance of doing that.
Do you think he just meant it's not sustainable? I mean,
I don't know. I've seen him a couple of times, and I must ask him one day what he meant by that. But I think he meant to just make me yearn to do that, because he kind of played mind games with people.
Reverse psychology.
Yeah, exactly. So he discouraged me from even thinking about it, which made me obviously want to do it more. And that's all I've ever done, really, as a player. So yes, so I started playing. I think it's in '96 with Blur. I'm not sure how big Blur are in the States these, but we did a big American tour, they're obviously the arch rivals of Oasis at the time, and so I did several tours with them. I've been in house bands where I've played. I did a thing for I think it was Nelson Mandela's 91st birthday party at Radio City in New York, and that was where I had the joy of playing with Aretha Franklin and Stevie Wonder. And and many other people. And let me think who else you mentioned there. Another series of concerts in Cape Town and Johannesburg in South Africa. I was part of the house band there, and Beyonce, Alicia Keys. So it was pretty good. 3 weeks rehearsal down in South Africa was fantastic, and then one gig, and one gig at each venue. And we did that in London at Hyde Park as well, with Amy Winehouse just about a year before she died. But it's an incredible privilege to have played with all those people. And now I'm doing a tour. Well, I just finished a world tour last year with Noel Gallagher from Oasis, the writing strength of Oasis. And then, I think we're going on the road again from May. We're going to Japan. But yes, we're lots and lots and lots of travelling. Lots of late nights. It's very tiring. Lots of time away from home, obviously, which can be tricky with children. But yeah, just constantly on the road. And I don't know if you know a band called Madness. They're like a national treasure in Britain. They're 40 years old this year, actually. Their 40th anniversary since they recorded their first single. And I play with them as well, and have done for 7 years. And we've done a few tours of America with them. But that's an ongoing thing as well. And I play baritone sax with them, but baritone with Noel as well.
For all these artists, are any of them, or have any of them since been as sort of like welcoming as Radiohead was, or do you get to meet these people or interact with them at all?
I sort of bump into people a lot. I know a lot of. I mean, obviously I'm not famous, but I know a lot of famous people, and I bump into people along. I bumped into Damon Albarn fairly recently at a concert. The singer from Blur and the Gorillaz, and yeah, it's nice to sort of catch up. I don't think anyone. I think in answer to your question, I don't think anyone's quite as welcoming as Radiohead were, actually. Funnily enough, yeah, they excelled themselves.
Do you have any travel tips for musicians? I mean, I can't imagine what it's like hauling a baritone saxophone around the world. That's like how much does it weigh? 30 pounds?
No, it's 30 kilos.
Oh, 30 kilos.
30, so that's it's quite a lot. Nowadays I don't touch it until I get to the gig, because there's a crew there's somebody who carries it around for me, and it'll travel with the crew. But yes, I've carried all sorts of saxophones all over the place. But it's a nightmare lugging a baritone sax on a plane, because firstly, if you put it in the hold of an aeroplane, it'll come out in several pieces rather than as a whole.
Yeah.
So it travels overland in a truck, and it's got a very substantial flight case as well. So, but tips for people, don't carry your own stuff.
Get a roadie.
Get someone else to do it.
Road crew.
Yeah. So it is quite nice, and that hasn't always been the case. But now, fortunately, I can turn up at a concert venue and get my saxophone out of the case, and then put it back, and then not see it again until the next day. So
I was going to ask how you keep your chops up and stuff between the gigs, but if it's a rock tour, I imagine it's pretty much every day, and you've got warm up time, and it's not really an issue.
Well, we have a the horn section. Currently, we always have our own dressing room. We can get there. Typically a sound check will start from at 4:00 in the afternoon till 5. The gig will be at 9ish, so there's plenty of time to do some long notes and kind of make yourself presentable sound wise. And the reality of that obviously is that sometimes that doesn't happen because you're in an exciting place, and you like we were in Chile a couple of months ago, or Buenos Aires or something, and you don't really want to practice.
Yeah.
But I think we've all got our routines of trying to even if it's just with a neck of a saxophone and a mouthpiece, just to blow some notes and form embouchure and get the muscles so that they don't flag during the actual gig. So yeah, you can take precautions and sometimes I take the soprano sax with me and done a few long note practices. But the reality, if I'm honest with everyone, is that doesn't happen so much.
Well, and so of course, you're also a doubler. And for those who don't know it, doubler with woodwind players really means like quadrupler or more, and especially for saxophonists, because I'm not sure which saxophones you own, but that could be the entire family from bass saxophone all the way up to sopranino. And so, Steve, you yourself also play flute, clarinet, and bass clarinet. So how many instruments do you own, and what's the most number you've had to take on the road at a time?
Well, I don't know how many I've got a lot of saxophones, and I've got a fair amount of clarinets as well. Because of the sort of nature of the work that I'm doing at the moment, I don't tend to play a lot of clarinet. And I was always a sort of very heavily a saxophone player rather than I know a lot of people split fairly 50-50, particularly theatre players and stuff, which I've never really been involved in that kind of work. Every now and again, of course, I have. But so, in answer to the question of how many do I take away, probably only about three saxophones, but always the baritone and the tenor. The alto doesn't get much of a look in these days. Soprano, I play a fair bit, but I've got flight cases for all of them, so it's fairly easy to do. But it's nice to take a flute away sometimes as well. But sometimes you just think, well, how many instruments do I really need?
Yeah.
Not a huge amount that I actually take away, but I've certainly got a lot of saxophones, and they're all stuck on the wall at the moment, hanging on fancy hangers.
So how many instruments would you say you own in total?
I've got, I think, 8 saxophones.
Wow.
5 clarinets, 1 bass clarinet, several flutes, all sorts of things. Hundreds of penny whistles, because every now and again you have to play one of those.
It's a problem with musicians. I don't know if you've seen that Bird Box movie from Netflix. Did you hear about that?
I saw it about 3 days ago. Yeah.
So there's a little meme that's come up. There's a picture of someone in a guitar store with their eyes covered, like, I can't look.
I thought that was a great film, actually.
Yeah, it was interesting. But I definitely relate to the guitar concept. If you see it, you're going to buy it. And musicians have sort of a horn collecting problem, it seems. My wife one time looked and she's like, "Why do you have 3 of those? They look the same." And they're bass guitars. And I said, "Well, that one's fretless, that one's a fretted jazz, and that one's a fretted P bass. They're totally different. What are you talking about?"
We get it. We get it.
Yeah, but to her, it's just boom, 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 boom. Same thing. So,
well, it's like that thing that the guitarist says. Whatever you do, don't. When I die, whatever you do, don't sell my instruments for what I said that I paid for them.
That's another truth, eh?
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, it was only a couple of £100.
Yeah,
3,000 later.
You can get good deals, but those instruments are usually stolen.
Yeah, exactly.
So, as a clarinetist or a saxophone player, I was also wondering, when you're on stage, speaking of, accessories and equipment, what is some of your favorite stuff to take with you on stage that helps you sort of get through the gig?
Well, I had a bit of a disaster recently. I think it was somewhere, I think it was in South America, and it was quite hot. I think it might be in Buenos Aires, actually, and we were doing a gig, and this is how unprofessional I was on this particular occasion, because I put my baritone on my sling. The sling snapped, and for the first time ever that I can remember, I didn't have a spare one.
Oh, wow.
And we were just about to go on, literally in about 40 seconds' time we were going on. And so I apart from always carrying spare reeds in your pocket onto the stage, obviously water, yeah, but always have a spare sling as well. And I had to fashion a sling out of a belt.
Wow.
I got one of the guitar techs to make another hole in a belt and quickly put it around my neck, bit of string, a couple of tunes, and then we went off, and then I kind of fixed the strap. But yeah, that was a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, just the other things that I would say, I don't really teach. I used to teach a little bit, but the thing that I would say to anyone is make sure every single note on the instrument works. If you're traveling a lot and you kind of warm up the baritone and it sounds great, and then you play the tenor, but you know, certain notes stick pretty badly, and if they've been in a flight case and they've been traveling in, you know, sort of humid conditions, and my an E flat key on the right hand little finger stuck, and it basically every time I went to play an E flat, it played a D. So it was a horrible clash. And it was just one of those stupid things, you know, being like. So I'm constantly what I'm trying to say is I'm constantly learning to make sure that those sort of things don't happen. Basic stupid mistakes, but it can happen to anyone. Play every single note on the instrument. Make sure your reed is nice and wet and vibrating well, and well, you know the deal for yourself. Do you always have spare reeds in your pocket?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And even sometimes if I'm going to be outside, I've played on those plastic reeds before.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've tried those, but
yeah, I like them actually. The Leger ones for baritone.
Yeah, they're made in Canada actually.
Yeah, I think they're fantastic.
You know, it's really funny to listen to the stark contrast between what you're describing and what I've spoken to Broadway players about. I mean, when you're playing, do you have almost like a saxophone tech that tours with the band, or are you responsible for this kind of maintenance yourself?
Well, I don't really need a tech. I mean, one of the crew will always put my instruments in the dressing room.
And then you get to assemble it yourself and do all that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because I wouldn't really want anyone touching it. I mean, you know, they put both my flight cases in the dressing room and open them up, and then it's always quite a pleasure to put the instrument together.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I misinterpreted. I thought you meant that you showed up and it was kind of set up for you, ready to go.
Oh no, it's the lids are open off the case, and I just put them together and you know, spend half an hour playing them really. But no, I'm not that much of a prima donna that I have someone kind of soaking my read for me. But,
yeah, well, it'd make me super nervous too. You know, I mean,
I wouldn't want anyone you know, because there's a kind of, we've all got our idiosyncrasies of how we put our horns away, and you know,
like a ritual.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, I've always quite enjoyed it. But yeah, I certainly don't need one.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you about was your film scoring career, which has been quite involved over the last 20 years. First of all, how did you get into film scoring from your start as a saxophone player doing pop charts?
I think in about 97, 98, I started writing music for TV commercials, and got very lucky with the first one I attempted, actually, which is a Schweppes campaign, which... You know, I did it totally on spec. No demo fee or anything. I just wrote this piece of music, and they kind of loved it. A few tweaks later, it ended up going, I think, it's about 78 different countries, which is obviously good financially. And they played it for about 6 years in quite a few of those countries. So it was quite. I thought, well, this is really easy. I just had to do a 15-second version, a 30-second version, and a 60, I think. And then I sort of got the idea that was quite an easy way of making money, and just progressed from there really, and started working for the same advertising agency, Young and Rubicam, which is I think now Rainey Kelly. And yeah, started doing that, and then I got offered to work for the BBC on a correspondent program about the war that Radovan Karadzic, actually, who was a nasty piece of work in Bosnia, and it was quite emotive Eastern European music. And I just suddenly realised that I loved writing longer form stuff, and I think I've written for about maybe 40 long form documentaries for the same company. Did a lot of work for the BBC, and then started getting into doing short films, and I've written a couple of feature films as well. But it's not possible to kind of that maintain the sort of energy of doing that when you're on tour for a year. That's the snag.
How do you practice film scoring? I mean, it doesn't seem like one of those things that you said you went from short to long form, but how? I mean, do you sit down and put on sort of a screenplay without music and just practice writing along to it, or?
I did actually, yeah. That's pretty much exactly what I did. I remember getting clips of music like the Hindenburg when it got blown out of the sky, and I remember writing a 1.5 minute just a sketch of sort of an orchestral piece, and I did practice on that actually, and there was something kind of haunting and sinister about this airship that was just, I think it was full of hydrogen gas, wasn't it? And there's a cracky old film, black and white film of it just disintegrating in the sky.
So do you think of the musical ideas first, or you let the pictures influence what you're going to write?
I really love watching something and helping the story being told, really, not forcing people to feel the emotions that you want them to feel, but just supporting what's going on. And you could take it in any direction, pulling people's heartstrings as you want, but it's good to be really honest with how you actually feel about the scene, and then write accordingly. And you can be very schmaltzy, and I kind of practiced with that. I wrote about four different pieces.
As primarily a sax player, what is it like realizing your musical ideas? Because whenever I think of a composer, I usually think of someone sitting on a piano, right or wrong, and kind of just working through their chordal ideas. But as a sax player, do your ideas come differently, or?
No, I use the piano as well. I very rarely use the saxophone as, in any score that I've ever come up with. Every now and again it's appropriate, but the two things are very separate. I play keyboards and program everything myself, and use a lot of other instruments as instrumentalists as well. But yeah, the saxophone just takes a back seat. It's not. I think I'm not a saxophone player when it comes to writing, really, particularly at all.
It's kind of like putting on different hats, almost.
It's totally, yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. So who does one study with, or how does one study for this type of career? I mean, you said you did a classical saxophone studies in college, but then afterwards, did you pursue additional study or got your practice through doing, or?
I didn't actually. When I was at college, and this teacher of mine, who was a classical sax teacher called John Harl, he kind of, in a sense, rubbed me up the wrong way, because he would, as I said earlier, he'd try and discourage me sometimes, but all it would do was, reverse psychology and make me absolutely determined to do what I wanted to do in the first place. But I've exhibited quite an interest in writing stuff when he was teaching me, and I said, John, can we have a lesson just kind of writing something? He said, sure, yeah, because he was a composer as well. And he said, I'll tell you what, we won't do anything. We'll go to the pub, we'll have a couple of pints, and which we did. And he said, but listen, go home tonight and listen to Prince, Sign of the Times, which I had stuck in my car at the time. I said, no, I don't need to listen to it. I love that album. He said, well, listen to that and then realise that you can write anything you want, because there are no rules. So, I don't know if you can learn it. I think you practice your craft, just like, practicing a clarinet or a flute or a saxophone or anything else. But when it comes to writing, I think you just have to be in the moment and know what functional harmony is and know what you're doing. But just do whatever you want that's honest to yourself and to the picture. That's what I would say. But I'm sure the film colleges full of people practicing and learning stuff, but best way is to do it.
Do you feel that it's absolutely benefited you to be a competent sax player and music professional first, though? I mean, I think a lot of people try and just dive into composition as its own entity.
It's very, very useful to be able to have a good musical education, and to be an instrumentalist as well of some sort. It doesn't matter what you play, but I think it really does help. Yeah, because you also know then how to get the best performances out of musicians that you then hire. Going back to very briefly to the Radiohead thing, because they're all great players. They know how to get things out of people. And some bands that I've played with in the past are hopeless and don't know what they're doing. It's one of those things, isn't it? I think yes. So, in answer to what you just said, I think for me it's crucial to have been an instrumentalist and to continue being an instrumentalist. For as far as my writing career goes as well.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head. My big takeaway of this conversation is that almost achieving the atmosphere or the artistic environment is somehow almost on equal footing to all that other stuff. I mean, it sounds like with Radiohead, they were able to bring out what they wanted, and that sort of lesson of communication allows a transcended art form, So when you have musicians in your studio playing your piece, you can provide that sort of comfortable, open atmosphere where something can happen.
Yeah, exactly. And you always get the best out of people if they're relaxed and they're happy.
Yeah.
Feed them well and be nice to them and be interested,
Well, you made that joke at the beginning too about, how to make a musician miserable, give them a gig. It's so true because many are so negative but there's reason for it too sometimes. I mean, you go to something, you get paid in a beer and no one was nice to you and it was cold. And
It can be terrible. You can be, you can be used and, come out with nothing, no money, no satisfaction. But that was the total antithesis of that, the Radiohead experience. So,
which film composers would you just absolutely love to work with, or who do you draw inspiration from?
Well, I mean, Morricone, I absolutely love. I'm a massive Godfather fan. I've got Godfather stuff all over the place. So, Nino Rota, Elmer Bernstein, obviously Bernard Herrmann. But yeah, but quite a few of those guys aren't around anymore. I absolutely love listening to. I buy more film score, original soundtrack CDs than anything else.
I'm like that too. It's almost a weird. I've done it since I was young. I used to listen to, for example, James Bond soundtracks, and I loved listening to how they would change the melody up and explore the theme in different ways. It was super interesting to me. They were, to me, like symphonies,
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. The atmospheres are brilliant. I mean, my wife thinks I'm nuts listening to that stuff all the time. But
well, I think we've covered everything I wanted to sort of touch on. Was there something else you wanted to add, or?
No, I think I'm No, I think that's it, really. You're very welcome to call me again.
No, thank you again for speaking with me today. It's been
my absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Clarinet Podcast. Show notes for this and all other episodes can be found at clarinet.com. While you're there, don't forget to join our email newsletter for free updates, exclusive offers, and a chance to win giveaways. Guest requests, listener feedback, and comments can be sent to feedback@clarinet.com. Special thank you to our season sponsor, Dario Woodwinds. Don't forget to check out their new show, Don't Blow It, on Instagram, and also try a box of their new Reserve Clarinet reeds next time you're at the music store. The show is also brought to you by Chamber Music Northwest. With over $20,000 in prizes and world-class guest artists and vendors, their upcoming clarinet celebration and competition is an event that you don't want to miss. Learn more at cmnw.org. Hosting for Clarinet is sponsored by Bakun and their new line of Lumiere clarinets, barrels, and bells. Get 10% off your next accessory purchase by using code Clarinet at bakunmusical.com. This program was produced and hosted by me, Sean Perrin, in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Music performed by Michael Lowenstern. Debate episodes co-hosted by Andrew Morrow. Audio editing by Brian Chappelles. and copy editing by Megan Taylor. You can support the ongoing production of this independently produced program by donating to our Patreon at clarinet.com/support. Supporters get early access to extended ad-free regular podcasts and exclusive access to patron-only episodes and live events. That's all for now. Be sure to tune in next time for more of what's new and neat with clarinet with the neatest people in the industry on the Clarinet Podcast.